Okay, picture this. An American aircraft carrier is slicing through the waters of the Arabian Sea. All of a sudden, an Iranian drone pops up on the radar and it's flying right for them. Warnings go out, but they're just ignored. Then, an F-35 fighter jet scrambles to intercept. In this explainer, we're going to unpack those tense moments and what this whole military standoff tells us about the high-stakes strategy of peace through strength. And we're getting it all from the perspective of a key U.S. official who was right there in the mix.
So at the very heart of this whole thing is this fundamental tension. And this quote from President Trump captures it perfectly. On the one hand, hey, the door's open, let's talk. But on the other hand, the military is always ready to go. This one sentence really shows you the tightrope the administration was walking, a really delicate and frankly dangerous dance between diplomacy and a full-blown confrontation.
All right, so let's zoom in on the specific incident that brought all these tensions right to a boiling point. We're talking about a military showdown in the sky over the Arabian Sea. So how did this whole drone encounter actually play out?
Well, from the U.S. military's point of view, the chain of events was super clear. First, you have the approach. This Iranian drone starts closing in on the USS Abraham Lincoln, and they're in international waters. Then, the warning. U.S. forces sent out multiple signals, basically saying, back off. But the drone just kept on coming. So finally, the response. An F-35 engages and takes the drone down. And the official reason? Simple, direct, self-defense.
Now, the official U.S. reaction here is really important. The ambassador calls what Iran did provocative, a deliberate test of America's resolve. But, and this is the key part, he also says there was no direct threat. So what's the message? It's kind of a 1-2 punch. Iran is definitely pushing the boundaries, but U.S. military power is so superior that those provocations are just going to fail.
But you have to understand, this drone incident didn't just happen in a vacuum. Nope, it was one move in a much bigger, much more complicated geopolitical chess game. To really get it, we need to look at the Trump administration's two-pronged approach to Iran, a mix of diplomacy and just raw deterrence.
And this slide right here, it lays that strategy out plain as day. On one side, you've got diplomacy, the off-ramp. The official confirms, yeah, President Trump was willing to sit down and have a meeting. But on the other side, you've got the military reality. A massive U.S. armada parked in the region, ready for anything. It's sending a very clear message. We can talk, or we can fight. It's your move.
The U.S. ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, he framed this perfectly. He described the president as a principal peacemaker, someone who really doesn't want to use force. But then in the same breath, he says he's also capable of a massive assault. Now, this wasn't just a description, right? It was a very carefully crafted image of a leader who would much rather have peace, but is absolutely, undeniably ready for war.
So, what was the price of admission for all this diplomacy? Well, the U.S. had laid out some very clear red lines. According to the ambassador, these were the non-negotiables, the bottom line for any deal. Iran had to completely abandon its nuclear ambitions, for good, and it had to stop the violent crackdown on its own people who were protesting for their freedom.
Of course, the United States wasn't the only country watching every single move Iran made. This whole strategy was being watched and, let's be honest, influenced by key allies, and none more important in this equation than Israel. Their perspective adds a whole other critical layer to this story.
And when you look at it, the U.S. and Israel were pretty much in lockstep. Washington was demanding concrete action, not just a bunch of empty promises from Tehran. And that was echoed by Israel, who was actively pushing the U.S. to remain strong. Their shared mission was crystal clear. First, prevent a nuclear Iran, no matter what. And second, dismantle its network of proxy terrorist groups like Hamas, which they both saw as a major source of chaos in the region.
And this focus on strength, well, it wasn't just about the Middle East. It was actually the central pillar of the administration's entire global strategy. And that put a really sharp focus on the NATO alliance and the very definition of what collective security even means.
A huge part of this strategy involved putting a ton of pressure on NATO allies to pull their own weight, financially speaking. The target they were pushing for was a massive 5% of GDP on defense spending. Now, while frontline allies, countries like Poland in the Baltics, were getting praised for hitting their targets, the message to everyone else was blunt. You need to step up. You've got to pay your share for our collective defense.
And just in case anyone thought the U.S. wasn't practicing what it preached, the official was quick to point to President Trump's proposed military budget, a jaw-dropping $1.5 trillion. This wasn't just some number on a page, it was held up as ironclad proof that the U.S. was leading from the front and seriously investing in its own power.
And right here, this is what it all boils down to. This is the fundamental belief that drove this entire foreign policy. In the ambassador's own words, all that military spending, all the pressure on allies, all the readiness for a fight, it all served one ultimate purpose. That strength will guarantee the peace. The core idea is that having overwhelming power isn't a provocation. It's the only real way to get to stability.
Which, of course, leaves us with this huge, unresolved question. The perspective we've just walked through is built on this absolute conviction that military might is the ultimate guarantor of peace. But is that always true? Or can projecting that much strength sometimes invite the very conflict it's trying to prevent? It's the central debate at the heart of this entire incident, and honestly, it's a question that continues to shape our world today.